best friends is Jonathan, and I always called
Mhm.
him Jonathan. It was never John. And then I moved in ninth grade. We always stayed in touch. Like, and then we met again as adults. We were both married, and everybody called him Johnny. And I was like, "You're Jonathan." Like, so to this day, when we hang out, it's like everybody's like Johnny, Johnny, Johnny. Like he changed to Johnny, and I'm like, "No, dude, it's Jonathan. Your name isn't Johnny."
It's funny. And by the way, does it sound okay? Am I
Yeah,
sound good?
sounds great.
It's funny because there was a phase in my life where I was John. And it was like totally this thing where it was like an insecurity thing where I was just so
Yeah.
happy to have anyone to talk to me. I was like, whatever you want. Right. And then I don't know, at some point I transitioned to Jonathan, but there's one, no, there's one person in the world who calls me Johnny. And it's not like it's a rite of passage. It's not like he earned the right. It's just like one person who started with it.
Yeah.
And eh.
He still gets away with it, huh?
Yeah, he gets away with it.
I think I'm the last person calling my buddy Jonathan. My wife knows him only as Johnny, so it's funny because she'll start talking about, oh, you mean Jonathan? Is that who you're talking? I'm excited to meet you. Josh isn't going to be on today. It's normal. He's kind of on like maybe 3/4 of them, but scheduling. He actually just launched another podcast. So Josh and I are business partners at MWI, our digital marketing agency.
Okay.
And then I've got kind of other things, and he's got some other things that he works on. And one of the other things is helping authors get published, because he has a couple published books. And so he started a podcast, and I think there was a conflict of interest when we pushed it, but it didn't matter because honestly, our other conversation went 30 minutes over like I thought it might, knowing who I was talking to. So that's why I wanted to schedule it anyways. So anyways, happy to talk to you and happy to meet you and excited to have you on the show.
Thanks, brother.
You know, Basila Bokoko, still my favorite name to say of anybody I've interviewed. Tell me about the connection there. How do you know her?
It is just, it's just a delightful name.
It is. Yeah. And then you meet her and you see her smile and you're like, yep, there it is. That's it.
Yeah, it's almost onomatopoeia, right? Like the name just makes you happy, and she just makes you happy. You know, we're more recent friends. We connected through a common friend, and since you've spoken with her, you know, like the connection is immediate and deep and profound.
Yeah.
And long and short of it, you know, she told me some of the stuff she was working on. I told her what I was working on, and it was just sort of like this instant soul level, you know, connection and mind meld. And so that's the story. There's no deep long history there.
Yeah.
Although if you want to tell people that she saved me from a bus of, you know, a bus as it was careening off a cliff, or I saved her, you know, from a burning building. Either one, you know, may be true in the future. You never know when this airs.
You never know. Hey, we may predict something. Yeah, she was like, I didn't know her. You know, she got I can't even remember how she got connected. Somebody reached out, and so we got her on the podcast. And yeah, just the conversation was just so enlightening, and she was just so. I specifically I didn't intend to, but I kind of talked just as I got to know her better. I was like, there's got to be some like processes or practices that you have in order to maintain such optimism and happiness. And so it was cool to kind of walk through some of those things that she does on a day-to-day basis. And I was like, I knew it, you know, I knew you were somebody that was living with that type of intention. Yeah, that was awesome. So
for sure. Well, I'll tell you, so we just, for my company, we just had a team call, and it was, we've introduced a number of new people. So the idea was to get everyone introduced and sort of values aligned. This wasn't like a, what are we doing in Q1 kind of call, right?
yeah.
And one of the things that was presented during the call was an answer to a question, you know, where the facilitator said, oh, go find something in your home, something that's valuable and meaningful to you, right? Kind of like if the house was burning down kind of thing.
Yeah.
Right. So, you know, I get a picture of the first time I held my daughter in my arms, right? And my CFO, who is, you know, a wonderful and loving father, and a wonderful person overall, he gets like, I'm holding up to the camera right now, this little green sort of springy little guy.
Yeah.
That one acquires in Copenhagen, and he's called a optimist because he bounces. So, you know, I consider myself like Well, I think in order to be an entrepreneur, you have to have like almost like clinical levels of optimism.
Yeah.
you
Yep.
know, so I've added this optimist to my desk display just to keep things real. But in general, I think anyone who starts businesses has to be. Well, there's a bunch of basically things that you could diagnose clinically
Yeah.
that every entrepreneur has, right? This sort of like delusional optimism, this sense of grandeur, this sense that something that you can create something that wasn't there before, in this and if you sort of go down DSM, you can start to diagnose all of them, and each one is probably a treatable condition, but in some we call it entrepreneur.
Yeah. That's a great way to put it. And it is true. There's you couple the optimism, the ambition, like you said, the kind of grandeur, that vision of grandeur of like, oh, I'm going to do this thing that's going to change the world and change people's lives and whatever, or, the smaller thing that may not be so big. But yeah, you put all of that together. And then as I've talked to more and more people, you tie it with like grit and just like, I will not fail, and like I'm going to go down swinging if I am going to, like there's a certain grit. And I know you listened to that guy Kawasaki interview we did a few weeks ago. And that's what I was like, what do you've seen like the best of the best, and you've also seen failures. Like, what do you chalk it up to? And that's what he said is it's just grit. It's just a certain level of tenacity that some people have and others don't, that either lead to, huge successes or sometimes epic failures. So, yeah, awesome.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I definitely heard that. And Guy is, as you know, is a hero of mine. It's funny. As I sort of followed the well-worn path from entrepreneur to mentor to investor, right there were many times to my mentees over the years. I mean, it was codified into my mentorship approach for a very long time, that the 10-20-30 rule.
Yep.
That guy Kawasaki, I don't know if that was his idea or if he just expounded it, but I attribute it to him. And and I agree with grit as being a necessary condition. The way I look at it as an investor is, if you're stepping up off the sinking ship, you should be wet up to your waist, right? Like you should be half underwater. That said, when people ask me, how did I get to where I am, what was my path? The artsy answer is that, oh, well, every step along the path to my success has miles of foundation beneath it that I can neither see nor understand. Of course, like what I really mean is that I don't know, I'm lucky. Like, good or lucky, it's luck. Anyone who tells you they were good is, they're either trying to fool you or themselves, or they're trying to sell something, right?
Yeah.
It's, you can do everything right and just fall on your face. And that's just the reality of it.
So let's get into the background here, and then we'll get to some of these successes and some of the incredibly ambitious visions of grandeur. We'll call it that again, that you've got for the future, which I'm stoked to hear all about with Arkhaven and some of the other stuff you're working on. But I want to start, as you know, with the podcast, we tend to start kind of at the beginning. And I as a there's a podcast. Have you ever heard the podcast Armchair Expert that Dak Shepard does?
No.
So Dak Shepard's a celebrity. He's a comedian. He's been in movies, whatever. He used to be on Punk'd. But he studied anthropology in school at UCLA. I studied anthropology as well. And the podcast is called An Armchair Expert because in anthropology, they call people, like they used to say, like anthropologists that would go into like Papua New Guinea and just like sit in their armchair and like watch the people and say, oh, now I know everything about these people. Really, they didn't get in and actually learn anything. So I call them armchair experts. Anyways, that's kind of my approach to things as well. I love understanding who people are, where they're coming from, what are the inner workings that kind of, and again, we've talked to entrepreneurs, we've talked to religious leaders, we've talked to academics, we've talked to, a lot of different types of people. But what you specifically growing up, where did you grow up? Who did you grow up with? What were your influences growing up? And what were, hindsight being what it is, how do you see that upbringing and how it kind of molded you and shaped you into the man that you've become?
Yeah. It's such a good question. And I'll tell you, I was born in Detroit, Michigan. And I kind of grew up 8 miles north of 8 Mile.
Okay.
And
16 Mile. If you've seen that movie, it's
well, and it's like, so the sort of big joke, right, in my life is, you know, in that movie, right, you've got Eminem and he's like in a rap battle, and it's like poor white kid, rich black kid, right?
Mhm.
And that's, whoa, right?
Whoa, yeah.
Um and at some point he says, well, I know something about you. I went to Cranbrook, and that's a private school, right?
Yeah.
And so my connection to the movie is I went to Cranbrook, and that's
Oh,
a
there you
private
go.
school. But I kind of, I joke a lot that I think I was like the poorest kid in the richest school.
Yeah.
And not that in any way really influenced my life or my upbringing. I mean, I had a very, very wonderful life. My father was a medical researcher and physician, and
And lymphology, right?
lymphology. Well, yeah, he was.
What is lymphology?
So, boy, I'll just have to,
Yeah, let's get your
pull up
dad on the line.
Wikipedia
Call
for
in your
you
lifeline.
really quickly. Look, it's the study of the lymph system, and everything we know about lymphology now, in many ways goes back to my father. So he was a big mind, and a wonderful role model in a lot of, ways for me and my siblings. And my mom as well was she had come from a very, very cool job in New York where she was in the perfume industry. She retired and came on board as full-time mom. And so I came from this wonderful home. And growing up, I always felt like I was a little on the outside, right? I
Well, you
think
mentioned
I
earlier that and you just wanted somebody to talk to you. So whatever they called you, he's like, yeah, I'll go with Joe.
yeah
I was
yeah
wondering
there
what
was
that dynamic was.
Yeah, there was, I looking back, you can sort of, with some time and distance say, well, I kind of, I was really, really empathic, very, very young.
Hmm.
And, that's a skill that it doesn't play well, right? When the boys just, want to do, football and baseball, and not really interested in talking about feelings.
Yeah.
And then there's this like boy girl dynamic that starts to develop where both sides have cooties,
Yeah.
right? I was kind of in the middle, and I always had one or two really good friends, and I was always very grateful to have those one or two really good friends growing up. And as I got a little older, middle school and then high school is really, really, really started making friends, and had some really, really good people that came into my life. And then as I left and went to university and went into real life, right? I started getting more friends, and I started sort of figuring out myself more, figuring out my very weird, wonky, mostly inappropriate sense of humor, and figuring out how to modulate myself in a lot of ways. And I think people sort of caught up to, the sort of empathy thing,
Yeah.
right? Where that became an asset rather than a drawback. But this all, it's funny, this all sort of came back to me a few years ago. I was giving a talk to a bunch of kids who were graduating from Cranbrook, from my high school. And I was trying to think, well, what is the life wisdom that I can give anyone, right? Like I don't have enough gray hair, I don't have enough life, and I don't know if I have, wisdom for myself, let alone anyone else.
Yeah. I've been there.
And and I'll tell you, I spoke with my wife about it, and I said, well, what is the thing you wish you knew? And we talked about it. I went, to my cave, I thought about it. And what I realized is that, you know one of the secrets to my success, one of the secrets to what I've accomplished in my life, is the fact that I just have this huge group of people around me, friends. And I think the reason I have so many friends is because on some level, there's some things you don't outgrow. And one of them for me is that, no matter how many friends I have in my life, there's always this little voice inside that says like, oh, you don't have any friends, right? Or you don't have enough friends. And so what that means is that I'm very engaged in the business of making friends, and I'm very engaged in the business of keeping and valuing and showing gratitude to the people in my life who share their lives with me. And for a long time, I was super embarrassed by this. Right? It sounded kind of like weak and pathetic
Mm-hmm.
and
So you
loserly.
internalized this pretty young, like as like you said, you were real empathetic or empathic. So you early on, you recognized I really love getting to know people, and I always want to be kind and get more friends, and I want to be like. And you were, and at that point, it was kind of like, what am I doing? This isn't supposed to be important to me. Is that kind of the nobody? This isn't important to anybody else. Why am I thinking so much about this?
Yeah, it was that, and also like, I mean, isn't that kind of lame, right? To be like, oh, I like, would you please be my friend? And um,
Flashback to Jonathan in middle school.
right. Wait, did I freeze? Did we
Yeah, you're
freeze?
good. You're good. It cut out a little bit, but we're back.
Okay. That's flashback to middle school. That could be
Yeah,
flashback to, a month ago, right?
yeah,
Uh, and 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 what's my point? My point is that, when I went to give this talk to these kids, and I've given this advice now many times, it is to say that as far as I know, and that is, and I've not met anyone yet who disproves this, all of us, we all have something about ourselves that is always with us, but that we don't like to look at. It's maybe something that drives us, something that we feel maybe embarrassed by. Like for a lot of people, it's a sense of like imposter syndrome.
yeah,
Like I don't belong in this room. And I can tell you the number of people in my life who are people you've heard of probably, right? Who are, CEOs, who are otherwise thought leaders, influencers, etc. I can tell you that by and large, many of them, most of them maybe, have this sense of imposter syndrome, or this sense of like, people look to me and I don't know what I'm doing most of the time,
yeah,
right? And either it's tied to grades, or maybe they didn't, go to law school or get an MBA, or maybe wherever that comes from.
yeah,
There's this passenger that we have in the passenger seat, right? And as we're going down the road of life in our little car. And my advice to anyone who cares is make friends with that, whatever it is, because it's going to be with you, and there's nothing you're going to do to get rid of it. It's your passenger. It's probably the fuel in your tank. And when everything is said and done, chances are, wherever you succeed in your life, it's probably because of that thing, right? That thing
yeah,
that sort of gnaws at you, and that you feel embarrassed by, but is probably your strongest asset.
yeah. I love that. I mean, I was going to ask you actually earlier when I can't remember what the point was that you made specifically, but I was going to ask was that, or the friends thing, how you had said like, I kind of always am like, I don't think I have enough friends, or do I need more friends or whatever. I was going to ask you, and then you kind of took the words out of my mouth, but I was going to ask, is that come from a scarcity mindset? Like you just have like an insecurity there, or like that imposter syndrome thing where you're like, I don't have, just an insecurity basically, or does it come from more of an abundance mentality of like, there's a lot of good people out there. I want to keep meeting people. And you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
but it sounds like you're kind of touching on that.
Well, in truth, my relationship to all of this has changed. And last year, coronavirus year,
Yeah.
had a profound impact on me, as it did on many. And if you had asked me a year or two ago, what defines you, and I would have said, well, I'm the guy that's in the room, right? Wherever the event is, whatever the event is, wherever the party is, or the after party, or the after party, right? Like I'm there. And and it's just because I truly love people. I
Yeah.
truly love getting to know people. And yeah, maybe there was this time in my life where there was this hunger that felt, that felt shameful. What I realized is, over time is I just actually love people. And, and it's, being helpful to other people, doing things for people. It's not a transactional thing for me. I don't do things to get things back. I help people where I can because it makes me happy to help people, truly. And, and I like bringing new people into my life because they inspire me and they teach me new things. And I get to, I have like 5 jokes. So I get to, I get to use them on someone who hasn't heard them before. There's all of these benefits. And also over the past year, as many of us I've sort of refined and refocused a lot, right? It's starting to feel more like I would rather have, 5 really good friends who, I can call at 3 a.m. to say, like, bring over a shovel, I need to hide this body, right? Like, instead of having 5,000 people who are, who I do care about, but it's just not that level of depth. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I completely know what you mean. I tend to be one who has a couple of really close friends. Family I'm really close with, and so I kind of keep family pretty close. There may be more, but friends, I tend to have a couple of close friends that I have that relationship with, and I'm on the other side when it comes to like going to the events. I'm very introverted in those situations. I don't enjoy that, and so it's kind of, especially professionally, it's been funny how I can turn it on. My wife will be like, "That's so interesting that you'll go like to this meeting and like just not want to talk, because that's your natural self is just to kind of listen." But then if I have to turn it on and go speak at an event or go to a networking event or something, it's like, okay, I can wrap my mind around professionally being that person, because it's a tool to get, whatever, to make progress in my career. But I can really easily turn it off, and I would prefer to turn it off a lot of the time. So what was okay? So you grew up there in Detroit, and then you eventually went on to college. You have a law degree.
Yeah.
So what's this transition been? Because now it's all like entrepreneurship and investing and a lot of this growth stuff. What was the transition from graduating high school to law degree to now more entrepreneurial stuff?
Well, I mean, I was
You
always
practice law as well, or no? Or you?
No, if I did for 5 years, I think.
Okay.
5, 6 years. I mean, yes, I still practice law a little bit, in the sense that, like, you never stop practicing law. It's like having a pickup truck. Everyone always needs the pickup truck. So,
I was
you
gonna
always
say, I might have some questions for you. I'll shoot over later.
Yeah, that's how that's how it be, right?
Yeah.
So I was always entrepreneurial. I mean, starting in high school, and then going through university, and then I only went to law school because I had started a company in in 2000, 2001, and then 9/11 happened, and I was in real estate. And it was just a tough time for the country, and it was a tough time to be in real estate. So my business partner and I at the time, kind of as a joke, we were like, what are we going to do for the next however long? And so I applied to law school. He ended up going to graduate school, not for law, but the joke sort of ended up being on me, because I ended up practicing law.
Yeah.
Which is honestly, it's hard as an optimist. Like, being an optimist and being an attorney, these are like, mutually exclusive personality traits.
Yeah.
So I did it for as long as I could, and then it was like killing me softly. So I went back to what I know and love, which is
What type of law were you
entrepreneurship.
practicing?
Well, that's the thing. I was doing like the puppies and unicorns of law, right? I was doing entertainment law. I was working with startups. So it's all flavors of different flavors of more or less the same brand of ice cream, right? You've got the people who are starting companies. You've got the people who are recording artists, or movie producers, authors, and such. But at the end of the day, they're all trying to bring something into the world that wasn't there yesterday. And their job is to come in starry-eyed, hopeful, and optimistic. And my job is to stab that optimism, over and over again with
as many holes in it as possible.
Right? It's like, no, it's all going to go down in flames, and that's why you need these contracts.
Yeah.
right? And truth be told, you do need the contracts. It's just, I didn't want to be that energy. I didn't want to be that person in the room, because like the real me was on the other side of the desk with them going, yeah, this is going to be great, guys. It's going to be awesome.
Yeah.
And then, the like the crunchy side of the
Internal battle.
frosted mini wheat had to be like, no, you're all going to end up fighting. You're all going to end up like hating each other. Like, just do the contracts now.
So what did you leave law to do? Did you have a startup that you started
Yeah.
while you
So
were still practicing, and then?
I came out of law. So prior to law, there's just sort of two companies I want to tell you about. We don't have to get into the whys and the wherefores of the companies. That's not as interesting as, to me at least, as the lessons I learned.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So as you might recall, I come from, a home where my father was a physician, my mom was a mom. And even though I was surrounded by big business people, right? I went to school with, the children of the C-suite of the big three
Yeah.
automotive companies, and a lot of the
And you went to school with the kid
businesses that
from 8 Mile
supported
too.
them. Oh, you mean Marshall? Yeah, we cool.
Yeah.
I call him M. It's fine. I was surrounded by that, but that was like, it never occurred to me. Like, I'll tell you, for example, I thought I invented mentorship. Like, it never occurred to me that I could go to someone and ask for help. So, I had a business that was a flop, right? It was a great idea. It just wasn't, I was the wrong person. And along the way, I made every possible mistake you could make. I mean, like almost in alphabetical order. And when everything was said and done, and I was sort of picking up the pieces, I looked back and I said, oh man, well, on the plus side, I can never screw this up again. I have learned everything there is to learn, and therefore I will never fail ever again with another company ever. So that was my lesson in entrepreneurship.
Famous last words. Yeah.
My very next company was my lesson in humility,
Yeah.
because it turns out that failure is always an option. And there's this guy, he's out of Colorado, and he runs a really cool journal, and he did an interview once, and he compared himself to like a katana blade, right? And he's like, yeah, it's like, I'm this like super sharp blade, but like, in order to get here, I just had to get, like put in the fire, and then hammered a bunch, and then put in the fire, then hammered more. And oof, boy, that's the truth, right? You think you got it, you don't got it. You think you got it, you don't got it. You get it. And if you think you got it, like, because you were good, like, chances are, most people go in, for round two, and they say, holy shit, how am I this bad at it? I just exited. Why can't I do this again? Well, because it's luck as much as anything else,
Yeah. And I've learned that lesson over and over and over again. And I've seen that as I've worked with others as well, is that when you're younger, I mean, still, it's funny because it's just a cycle. I still think this way, right? But like, it always seems like, oh yeah, they figured it out. They figured it out. They figured it out. The more you start to work with the people that figured it out, you realize, oh no, they didn't figure it out. They worked really hard. They worked harder than other people did. There's a healthy amount of luck involved. They took risks that other people weren't willing to take, whatever it might be. But even most of the time, it's been very rare the time that I've met somebody that, even like you said, that imposter syndrome, there's very few people that actually feel like they have it figured out. Most people are like, I don't know how I got here. I'm just kind of making this up as I go. Right. Like, yeah. And the more you see that, I guess it gives you hope, because you're like, well, I guess I can do it too, but there's so many variables at play, that like you said, that luck, or again, that grit, or whatever it might be, that really, but really we're all just figuring it out, right? And we're all on different levels, and you see the person that you think has it all figured out, but really truly they're looking at somebody else and saying, I think they figured it out, I'm working to get there. Like, it's just an endless cycle, it seems.
Well, I want to go back to something you said, because you kind of hit the nail on the head. But before I do, it's just, I want to acknowledge and share my appreciation for all of these people that you're talking about, and yourself as well. because if you can admit to others and admit to yourself, more importantly, that it's luck, right? If you could admit to, yourself and others that, well, I don't know what I'm doing, and if you can look, if the person you look up to is yourself 10 years from now, right? Like if that's the direction you're headed, then you have some level of self-actualization that is just going to make life so much easier for you. And I think it makes life easier for the people around you because you're not painting painting life with unrealistic expectations.
Yeah.
So, so from that point of view, kudos to you and to the people around you who are open to that and who are saying that, because that's so huge. And I think it's really important to hear. And this goes back to what you were saying, um, talking about taking risks. There's a statistic I make up every time I say it, and it doesn't matter because whatever it is, it's probably pretty close to true. 99.4725% of all companies, right, die in the heads of their creators before they ever see the light of day, right? And the song that, or the words to the song that go along with that is, well, I'm not good enough. I'm not smart enough. If this were truly a good idea, someone else would be doing it. I can't leave my job to do this. I don't have time. All of it basically boils down to, something based on fear or based on a belief that is, I'm not good enough, right? Or I don't have what it takes. And the reality is, I, as an entrepreneur, which, by the way, is, again, it's like a series of mental illnesses, right? Like being an entrepreneur is not someone who starts businesses, right? Someone who starts businesses is a business starter. Someone who's an entrepreneur starts businesses because that's literally all we know how to do. Like we can't do anything else. We are completely useless in any other in any other endeavor. So, point is, getting people over that hump, getting them over that negative self-talk, it's so important because at the end of the day, aside from, these conditions that I share with other entrepreneurs, there's no difference between me and you being yourself or any other person on this planet, uh, other than the fact that, I did the thing. I did the thing that maybe you thought of, and you probably thought of it before I did. I just did it.
Yeah. Yeah. And therein lies which one side's not better than the other. That's the other. I taught entrepreneurship at university for a couple of years. And that was one of the things as I'd meet certain students that it was like, nothing I can do or say is going to make you fail. Like I could try my hardest to wouldn't, but no matter what happens, you're going to figure out how to succeed. It might not be this thing. It might be the next thing, but some people just have that, and that's great. But then a lot of people don't. A lot of people don't have that, and that's okay too. They're a better fit to go and pursue an education in X, Y, or Z and become the very best X, Y, or Z that they can become, and they're working for somebody. It's the side of entrepreneurship that makes it out to seem like it's just the only thing, and if you're not doing this, and everybody can do this. I just don't. I don't think it's true. I think there's, like you said, the way you're putting it is funny. Like there's like actual, behavioral or clinically, you could diagnose these things as like, no, you just have something that other people may not have. And anyways, yeah, it's interesting, the whole entrepreneurial landscape. I mean, when I was a kid, I don't even think I knew what entrepreneur meant. It wasn't something that was talked about as much as it is today. Right now, it's all about entrepreneurship. It's kind of interesting because I remember hearing the first time when I was maybe in high school or something that there was entrepreneurs, and you're like, what does that mean? It was a foreign word. It's such a common thing now, probably very much thanks to the internet and thanks to some of these big stories that we've heard over the last 20 years. Yeah. So did you have? I think there was a success out of it, right? Wasn't there which company?
Oh yeah, I mean, I have had successes along the way.
That's kind of a funny way to think. I think you had success at some point.
Yeah, no, actually, I have no idea how I got on this show. Can you give me a job? No, I did have successes along the way. That's for sure. that said, going back to what you were saying about entrepreneurship becoming this sexy thing,
Yeah.
right? Like, entrepreneurship, I think, has almost become commoditized as
Hmm.
an idea, right? Like, oh, if you saw The Social Network, like, if you are an entrepreneur and you get it right, you can be like an asshole to attorneys, right? And when they're trying to take you down, you can tell them that you can buy them in the entire city, that the city block that you're sitting in. And isn't that cool? Right.
Yeah.
And that way it's almost like buying, lottery tickets and saying, "Ooh, this is my time." And sure, I mean, there are the unicorns, and I'm not a unicorn guy, as of yet. I'm a 0 to 60 guy, right? Like, I make the company you've never heard of doing the thing that probably doesn't matter to you that much. I mean, we've done some really cool bleeding edge stuff, but you know, at the end of the day, this idea that if you win, you win, like,
Yeah.
like this sort of Silicon Valley-esque prize. That's what people, I think about when they think of entrepreneurship on one side. But on the other side of it, on a different side of it, you've got a government point of view, for example, which is to say, the more business starters, the more entrepreneurs we have in a community, the stronger the economy, right? Because
Hmm.
these are the job creators, right? And then there are a number of industries that are built up around the idea of entrepreneurship. And, from credit card companies to banks to attorneys to whatever, the services industries that all go around, your small business or entrepreneur. All of them are sort of, selling the same dream in a lot of ways. When the reality is, if you have like a nice lifestyle business that's kicking off like 150K, 250K, or even, up to 1 million a year or something like that, like, you're killing it, right? Like,
Yeah.
what more do you need? And you talked before about abundance. One of the things that I'm really driven by these days is moving from this scarcity mindset that we're sort of given as a birthright, right? Uh, moving to abundance so that we can have this sense of enoughness,
Yeah.
right? So that we can be comfortable in the space of enoughness.
I
Uh,
remember in business specifically talking about that, again, entrepreneurship, right? And the unicorns that are what you hear about mostly is, well, this guy started this company and went to Silicon Valley and hired a bunch of people and got some investment and then sold it for $5 billion. Like, and the narrative of entrepreneurship is that it's that you're not successful until you hit some of these million, billion, $1 trillion numbers, whatever, maybe not trillion, but you don't. And so, well, unless you're Jeff Bezos. So, but
right.
I remember having that realization because I was kind of sticking to that narrative. Like, I took entrepreneurial classes in college. I got the business off the ground and we were growing. And then all of a sudden, like 4 or 5 years into it growing, and just kind of this constant need for like growth, 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 I kind of stopped and I was like, wait a minute, what if we never grew again? We have like great, income each month, like we're bringing in money. We have great revenue. What if we never grew again? Why don't we build a business that if it never grew again, it would be incredibly sustainable and healthy? And it maybe not have the sexy story of like, well, it sold and then sold, or grew and then sold for $50 million. But what if we just kept this and I kept this business for 50 years? I'd build an incredible life for myself and I'd provide work for all these people, and not that you should not have a growth mindset, but there's a fine line to where I realized, oh no, like I've built it now to this point where we can make it sustainable and you
Yeah.
can keep a business sustainable and it doesn't have to be that unicorn, right? And especially when you're in our business, digital marketing agency, you don't hear a lot of those that go and sell for $1 billion. So it's like, no, let's be able to build a really healthy business that supports amazing businesses, provides great employment opportunities for incredible people, has these great core values and does all these things. And it's okay if it were never to grow again, let's be healthy in that. Like if we didn't close the deal for 6 months, let's make sure that we're healthy in that, it's an interesting, it's a paradigm shift that is tough to have when you're in the thick of it. And obviously you have to get to the place where you can even think that way in the first place in order to think that way.
Yeah.
anyways, it's interesting.
Yeah, well, it's an ego thing,
Yeah.
right? And I'm one of those guys who has to see the mountaintop to decide whether or not I want to live on the mountaintop,
Yeah.
right? And in my own life, I've seen the mountaintop with respects to a certain amount of wealth. I've seen the mountaintop with respects to what I do with that, right? I've seen the mountaintop with respects to, being the person on stage, right? And giving the talks and doing the thing. And, my mom has a scrapbook of newspaper articles and stuff that
Mm-hmm.
mention me. And at some point, at least for me, that just became uninteresting and it became more trouble than it's worth.
Yeah.
Right. I don't know about you, but every time I give a talk, it takes like a week of my life, right? Because you have to prepare for it, then you give it, and then there's like, 3-4 days of follow up,
Mm-hmm.
spread out over how long, people who just want to talk to the person who was on stage about something.
Yeah.
Right. And so at some point you say like, oh, okay, I've done that. Right. Like if I'm gonna get on stage, if I'm going to do the thing, like it's because there's some real value for someone else or something else that I can create by doing that. It's not for me anymore. Right. Like I don't have that drive. And it goes to the business as well. I mean, you want to have a growth mindset if that's what's necessary for the business to survive and to
Yeah.
thrive and to provide the life that you want to be able to provide for your employees and their families and for yourself and your family in that order, right? And if there are things that you feel like you can do, with more resources as a company, then sure, you should be looking to grow. And if not, like there's nothing wrong with tending your garden. And if that's it, unless you're like this legacy minded person who just has to have a Wikipedia page and it has to be in your grandkids textbook or something like that, right?
Yeah.
Like unless you're that kind of person, yeah, god, there's just nothing wrong with at the end of your life, laying there and thinking, man, I provided a good life for myself, my family, and for a bunch of other people who dared to follow this dream that I have. Like that's enough.
Huge win. Yeah. So what are you working on right now? So all of this coming, kind of to where you're at currently. What are you doing?
Sure. So uh, about 6 years ago now, I watched a video on YouTube, and the video is called "Humans Need Not Apply." CGP Grey is the channel. It's a great channel, not a sponsor, and
Humans need
and
not apply. That's what the video is called.
humans need not apply. And it was basically the TLDR of the whole thing. Eh, You know, the revolution is coming, AI and automation. And if you think that this is going to be the same as the other revolutions in history where some people lost jobs because of a growing skills gap, or their jobs became obsolete, but new people got those jobs or they could upskill into those jobs, and it was a bump in the road, but in general things went along as they were, only better, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
if you think that's what's going to be, you're wrong, because the next people who take jobs are going to be machines, right? And that's the point. So, I mean, these days, this is a conversation we have, right? 6 7 years ago,
Yeah, not at all.
at least for me, I mean, whew, this blew my mind. And so I basically spent the next few years in a think tank of one, thinking about, holy moly, what is the future going to be like when we've got like mass unemployment, like when we have a bunch of people who can't afford to feed themselves and their children, like what is that going to look like, and how do
Yeah.
we solve these problems? And so,
And right, I guess the hypothesis or the idea is that within 30 years time, and this is what you're getting at, right? At least 50% of the people in the world will be permanently unemployed. And
yeah,
and that is based on the idea that AI machines whatever is going to be so productive and so critical to everyday life that it's just going to be out of the level of expertise or understanding or knowledge of your average good old fashioned human being.
Right. And those numbers came out sort of after I went through my multiple years of doomsdaying, right? We started to see numbers like that coming out of a number of different organizations. And there's a huge spread anywhere from, 0% to 100% with, a lot of agreement between 30 and 80% and 50% being a number that everyone seems to, more or less be okay with. And it's because of AI and automation. It's because of forced displacement. It's because of people aging out of jobs. It's because of a growing skills gap. It's because of, people who could be getting a job, live in the wrong place to get that job. Maybe they don't have computers or internet access or what have you. So there are a number of factors that go into this calculation of future unemployment. And whether that comes to pass or not, things aren't great now, right?
Yeah.
We have already a lot of homelessness. We already have joblessness. Nothing on the order of 50%, but it's not evenly distributed across the world. There are places where it's very bad and places where it's less bad. We have resource insecurity. And this is something that affects people and governments, food, water, and energy insecurity, right? We have a growing gap between people. We see people sort of siloing ideologically. We see this complete break in certain parts of the world in multi-general conversations, meaning, kids talking to grandparents, right? That just doesn't happen anymore. And it's not a huge surprise to see the consequent rise in isolation and depression and self-harm, et cetera, right? And on top of that, we have global warming. We have a number of problems. And so, going back a few years, I look back on, oh man, I basically just wasted a lot of time trying to come up with, solutions to problems that haven't happened yet.
Yeah. Hard to do.
Well, the thing is, who am I? I'm nobody. I'm just a guy, right? But like, even if we could get all of the smartest people in the world into one room and get them to solve these future problems, right? Like, even if we could do that and we could get those solutions out into the world, like, we as a species would do nothing with that information. Like, of all this
present.
Well, I mean, of all the skills that we have as a species, taking course corrective action in the face of existential doom is not one of them.
Yeah.
I mean, we need to spend $50 trillion to have an impact on global warming. We're not doing that. We're not even trying that hard.
Yeah.
So what can we do today? So I did what I want to do when I am trying to, figure out the answer to a big, chewy question. And I went out into the woods. It was very dramatic. I told my wife and daughter that, I will not be back till I've, come up with a solution for this thing. Right. And I mean, as it happens, I was back the next day. I had an idea really quickly.
It could have turned into a lot different story. I was out there for
there were no bears. I didn't have to cut off an arm. I didn't even have to fish. I had
24-hour camping trip.
Yeah. Like I had, I had some trail mix and then I got in the car, went home. But I also had a vision, and my vision was a completely vertically integrated building with, shelter, food, water, energy. And
when you say, explain to me, when you say you had a vision, I want to get to the point, but when you say what does that mean to you, or how are you, what was the experience that you had specifically? Because
it was literally a vision. I'm not
so like you were standing there and then in your mind you saw something, or you saw something in front of you that was actually, you felt like you could reach out and touch it, or was it just
no, I see. No, I get what you're getting. No,
yeah.
I see what you're getting at. No, man,
I just think of vision. There's a lot of different ways that somebody might hear vision and say, "Oh, like he passed out and woke up."
I woke up surrounded by peyote.
Yeah.
No, no, it was not that dramatic. I was sitting there and just suddenly my imagination was filled
Okay. So you saw it
with,
in your mind's eye.
yes, with this vision. It was a very specific vision. And I could, to this day, I could draw it for you. And it was just so crystal clear that this was the path to follow. And and so shelter, food, water, energy, community, those five things together are what I decided to call an arc. And the company is called Arkhaven.
Is
And
there a relation to Noah's Ark when you see, because naturally when you see Ark, you think of Noah.
yeah, I mean,
I mean, it's similar
it's
and
it's there is a relation, right? Like in the sense, a relationship in the sense that, eh, if we look at a future where things might not be great, if we look at today, where there's, where life is very difficult for people, it's easy to sort of paint this dystopian view for the future. For a lot of people, that was their childhood,
yeah.
right? For a lot of people, that's their experience of life today.
Mm-hmm.
And so as if we look to a future that is uncertain, right? Like if we are going to experience this level of unemployment, like you have to ask bigger questions, like how many taxpayers can a government afford to lose before they cease to operate as a government?
Mm-hmm.
Right. Like, and what is the cutoff before things like international aid stop flowing? Right. Because there are countries that exist, largely off the aid coming from other countries. And as we look to, what are the conditions in those countries? What are the conditions in the US? You say, okay, well, when does this break down? At one point do companies have to go out of business because they don't have enough customers to support, their own employees, and then all of those employees become unemployed, right? So, and at what point maybe do even financial systems break down?
Yeah.
And I don't, like, none of this has to be true, by the way. Like whether this comes to pass or not, it's not really relevant. All that matters is that it could. Right. And, it's a Punnett square, if you know what that is, right? Like where you say there's, two options. And I mean, it can be any number, but we'll do two by two. There's
Yeah.
two options, and we either engage or we don't. Like option one, the world, the world economy shits the bed. Like option two, it doesn't, right? Option one, we do something about it. Option two, we don't. At the end of the day, the only way we lose is if we don't do anything.
Yeah.
And if we do something, maybe we just change the way people live, and for the better, right? Like maybe that's all we accomplished. But if we change the way people live for the better, and also that creates a future state where we have to answer very hard questions, but we're doing so with roofs over our heads and full bellies, that is so much better than trying to answer those questions while we're busy also killing each other for food, right?
I just today, before our interview with Lindsay Hadley, she's one of the founding members of Global Citizen. Is it Global Citizen organization or something? But anyways, they're a huge. What did she say? I'm gonna butcher it because I don't have my notes in front of me. But it's basically a nonprofit. She liked to call it a for impact. She's like, I don't really like the word nonprofit because it just has a negative. Like I like for impact. We're doing things, to make an impact in the world. Anyway, they're a big deal. They've done a ton of stuff to help global poverty. That was the whole initial thing, and now they've done a lot with every celebrity you can imagine, and concerts that have raised hundreds of millions of dollars and impacted, more impact billions of dollars, to fighting this. And so we talked all about global poverty. We talked like for a lot of it, and she was kind of giving us a ton of statistics. And one of the things I said, well, how do you end this, and what are some of these organizations doing that are helping, and what are maybe some that are doing that are hurting? Anyways, I think she said the UN has a list of 17 things that if you could fix those 17 things, then poverty would be gone. And I think you named about, when you were specifically talking about the arc here, which we're going to get into, you said 5 of them right off the bat, I think. Didn't you say? And I think those were 5 of the 17, it sounds like.
Yeah.
I don't have it in front of me, but
yeah, those are the 17, sustainable development goals.
mm-hmm.
And it's funny, within the UN, they get a lot of pitches from people that want to solve problems, right? And they'll say, okay, well, which of the sustainable development goals are you solving? And, it's common for someone to say, well, all of them, right?
Yeah.
Like what I'm doing addresses all of them. And, in the sense that life is a seamless web and you can't tug one string without tugging them all. Sure, that's true. But in a very direct and literal sense, it's, aspirational, right? That said, ARCs are definitely addressing, quite a few of the SDGs. And, someone, told me with a straight face just last week, like, wow, you might actually be hitting all 17. And as I don't know about that, but it is, when you start looking at a lot of the problems in the world and say, okay, is this the problem or is this a symptom of the problem?
Yeah.
Right. What you ultimately, or what I shouldn't say, what I ultimately get to is that, there are a number of problems that come from scarcity, right? Either literal or perceived scarcity, right? Like I don't have enough or I don't feel like I have enough. And you can be a billionaire and have scarcity. You can have nothing and have scarcity, and they both feel the same, in a lot of ways, right? Because it's triggering a bunch of processes biologically that we respond to, can't necessarily control, and it feels real, right? So, what can we do to move away from scarcity to abundance, which is what we were talking about earlier, right? And if you can provide actual abundance, right? If you can provide an arc, which is
Yeah. So get back to the vision, because I feel like I went on a tangent, and now people are probably listening like, wait, hold up, there's vision, and then we never touched on it. So tell me what what you envision.
We screwed up the elevator pitch here.
That's my fault. I came in with too many questions.
No. It's I wrote an article once that basically ended with the line, "I don't need an elevator pitch. You need a longer attention span."
There you go.
That was not well received by a good portion of the readers and was very well received by everyone else. That said, going back to an arc: shelter, food, water, energy, community. Right. The idea was and remains to this day, but the idea was this should be sustainable, regenerative, ideally off grid, right? And something that we can give to people with abundance, right? Should overproduce food, water, and energy, right? So that the people who live in the ark can have more than what they need, so that they can share it with the people around them, right? In the broader community, right? And, and if we do that, then we're creating a condition today where we can have a for-profit business that can grow and scale, and where we can try over and over and over again to get it right.
So it's the idea is we'll put it in terms that we currently have in our lingo, is an apartment building, a place where people live, where there's more than one resident. There's a lot of residents in this place, but it's completely self-sustainable.
Yeah, that's a good way to look at it. Can you close the doors like biodome style? That's not necessarily the goal. The goal here is to provide enough for people that if something bad does happen in their lives or globally, that there's enough for them to survive, right? So food, water, energy, right? And where'd I got lost. We'll have to cut this whole part out.
No, it's all good. Tom will have a fun time editing it. Hi, Tom. I always say hi to Tom when we have a.
Hey, Tom, how's it going, man? Tom, you're doing a great job right now. I want you to know. You can keep that part in.
Yeah, I'm sure it'll come back. I want to ask, well, unless you have it. You got it?
God, I have this like very normal riff that I do, but like in this conversation, I kind of got pulled out of my flow. Like, so we can try back into it if because that might play a little better.
Sorry, I threw it off with the vision, because I just know, because we've talked to the reason I bring those little clarifications up is because we've talked to people that are like super religious and leaders of big religious organizations. We've talked to people that are highly academic and atheist, we've talked to people that are incredibly successful entrepreneurs and others that are moderately. Anyways, there's such a wide range of people that we talk to. And again, this is where my fascination comes from, where they make their meaning and where these things, so I threw it off with asking you that question and trying to get into the nitty gritty on what you normally just say as I had this vision, and then now let's move on. And I'm like, what tell me what that means. I genuinely want to understand like what that means for you. Cause I talked to some people that a vision to them means that they were meditating and then woke up 8 hours later. And they're like, I saw through time and space, and you're like, okay, great. That's awesome. Other people, it's not quite as, but I do want to ask a question, or I actually want to make a statement, and hopefully this will all bring it back to you. But from a business standpoint, if I'm just looking at this entrepreneurially, this idea, not my only, but there's a community here in Arizona where I live. We're outside of Phoenix, very, very highly populated. I think the county that I live in is one or two largest in the country for like a suburban area. Anyways, there's a community called Agritopia. Mm-hmm. And it's just a development like the one right next to it. It's just a big subdivision. The houses are smaller, the lots are smaller, but it's nice, white picket fences, and it's this nice little neighborhood. But in the middle of it, there is a farm where there's vegetables growing, and there's an orchard, and there's citrus, and there's all this stuff that you can go, if you live there, you can go and take and also give, right? And so it's kind of this like community garden or community little mini farm there. Then they also right there kind of within the same place, they have like a restaurant that uses food from that. And then they have a couple of small local business. They have like a hair salon, and they've got anyways, a couple other little small businesses that really the encouragement is to say like, we got everything you need right here in your community. And it's a very highly sought after community, not because it's some like ritzy, glamorous mansion neighborhood. The homes are actually, they're nice homes, but they're 2,500 square feet, maybe 1,500 to 30,000 square feet, somewhere in there, nothing huge. And again, not too glitzy or glamorous or anything, these homes, but just again, so from an entrepreneurial standpoint, my mind has always thought like they figured something out that people are craving, that people want, that people need, that people are willing to pay top dollar to get into. And there's also this exclusivity to it that's like, oh man, like they got an Agritopia. I hear that all the time. Like, oh man, the house went for sale and it sold for X amount over asking price within 10 minutes in that area, So again, my mind goes to like just this idea of a self-sustainable community is something that I'm not sure if it's innate, if it's just it's part of our DNA, it's part of our biology to say, I crave that, and also then not being fear-based and not being scarcity-based, but also knowing, like you said before, it doesn't matter if any of this stuff happens. What matters is that we're ready for it if it does, or that we're taking steps to prevent problems from happening that may possibly happen. There's something within us again that craves that, and that is interested in self-preservation. And that seems to check a box for a lot of people. Again, that's just my experience from a business entrepreneurial, as far as like what the market's saying about that idea seems to be one that is interesting to people. So I can only imagine, depending on the type of area, if you're in a more metropolitan area and you said that building right there, you can move into it. You've got amazing neighbors. You're all like-minded. And the idea is it's self-sustainable, as the arc, itself. That's awesome.
Thank you. And that basically gets right to the heart of it, right? We look for capital T truths when it comes to humanity. And I'm a believer that human problems have human solutions, right? And it doesn't have to be complicated. We want safety. We want security. We want a sense of well-being. And when we talk about an arc, this is nothing new. There are intentional communities in Israel. There are kibbutzes or kibbutzim in and around America and around the world. You see these agri-hoods, right? And we're standing on the shoulders of all of these institutions, and not even standing on the shoulders. We're really just coming into a place and learning from them what we can, and saying, okay, can we use, for the first time in history, by the way, can we use proven technology? I mean, this is off-the-shelf technology. Can we use proven technology to to deliver this this way of living just to more people? And can we create a middle market that doesn't exist yet around this way of living, which is just to say, can we just show people, hey, this is something that is actually for you, right? Because when you talk to people and you say, okay, who lives like this? Some people say, oh, that's how hippies live, or they say,
Yeah.
oh, that's how preppers live, right? And sure, I mean, those are both things that are true, but it's really how we can all live. And given the choice, a lot of people do choose to live like that. And so the idea with an ARC is that today it's a for-profit venture, and we're going to use that profit basically to build as many ARCs as we can build, because there are two things that are true. One, I know for a fact that I can build an ARC, right? And two, I know for a fact that we won't get it right the first time, which isn't to say that it'll be wrong. It's just it won't be the perfect mix
It'll just continue to get
of,
better. Yeah.
right. So we want to collaborate with anyone in the world who will talk to us. We want to co-vision and co-create what an ARC even means in your community, right? Like, what are the challenges you're trying to solve? What are the things you need? What are the resources that exist in your community, so that we can build the perfect ARC, not to scale and mass produce, but the perfect ARC for you. And so, as we push out into new markets around the world, it all starts with local resource mapping. It all starts with a conversation that we have with people on the ground, so that we can do the right thing in the right way, or as close as possible. And the reality is, someone might come and say, well, you messed this up, you didn't do it right. And we'll say, yeah, we know, right? Like, our core values are humility and curiosity. Like, all we know is that it must be done and that it can be done, and we're going to work really hard to figure it out. And today it's for profit. Tomorrow, if it needs to be, it's for free forever for everyone who needs it.
I love those core values, by the way.
Thank you.
They go very well together. Yeah, I can appreciate that humility and curiosity. Um, so what's the next step then? I mean, where is this in process? I think you've been working on the idea for a couple years now, a year and a half, a year. How long has it
Yeah.
been?
So, we started this in 2019. I brought a team together 2019. We looked towards the end of 2019. We went out to raise what we called an A round. We ended up really oversubscribing by the beginning of 2020, and by March of 2020. None of the money hit our bank account because coronavirus happened.
Yeah.
So we basically spent 2020 just drilling down, talking to people, trying to make the idea as good as we could possibly make it, knowing that that things were going to turn around. And really, towards the end of 2020, we tripled the size of the team, because all of these amazing people from literally all over the world started coming in and saying, oh, well, I have this to share, I have this to share. And we've gone from being what is in a sense a startup, even though I have 20 years of development experience, right? Like, we've gone from a startup to really being a roll up, because now we have all of the technologies, and we are still going to reach out and find more. But we have a really good starting point, and we have all of the things we need. We're on track to close finally the round that we tried to close last year. We're
Yeah.
on track to close it in March, so that I can stop spending my own money on this.
Yeah.
And then the way we go to market isn't by building an ARC. The way we go to market is by engaging the world in a conversation, just like the one I just shared with you, to say, hey, we're Arkhaven. Nice to meet you, right? Like, this is the challenge that we're facing as a species. This is our idea on how we think it can be solved, and we need your help, right? So please, share your ideas with us, share your challenges with us, and we're going to use these answers to figure out where we build the first few arcs, and go from there. And we're going to use these answers to make sure that as we drill down into each one of these communities, that we're working not just with the community leaders, but with the people who are going to be living in our arcs, say, hey, how can we do this? Because we want to not only provide, shelter, food, water, energy, and community. We also want to uh, provide a testing ground so that we can start to test what are the elements of well-being, of happiness, for that we can create through design, that we can create through community values, that we can create through this lifestyle, and put those out into the world as well. Because at the end of the day, we have very little time.
So when and where are you anticipating this? I mean, obviously there's a lot of steps to get there. The first step
Yeah.
sounds like is getting some funding, and then doing the marketing and getting the message out there, and the brand building and brand awareness and stuff. When and where do you foresee at this point? Plans always change, but when and where do you
Yeah.
see the first arc?
Well, we're in a very happy position of, without having advertised anything. You can go to arkhaven.io and you'll see a website with our logo on it. There's really nothing to see there. And that's because we haven't wanted to announce yet. In fact, this is almost our first, in a sense, this podcast is really one of the most public things that we've done yet as an organization. That said, we already have, you know, land that's been offered to us all over the world. We already have amazing and generous offers, subsidies coming from various, cities and countries literally around the world, because there's just an acknowledgement that it's time for this. So I'm less concerned where the first one goes than I am where the first three go.
Mm-hmm.
And why is that? Because every arc we build sends a message, regardless of whether it's the message we want to be received. For example, if we build it, an arc in San Francisco, that says one thing. If we build it, in Lagos or in Greece, or or parts of Greece, or in the Netherlands, or Brazil, in Sao Paulo, right? Like depending on where we build it, that sends a message about who we are and what we're about. And so, if I get everything I want for the holidays, we'll be building three, not one to start, and it will be three very different parts of the world. And I can tell you without getting too deep into it, that we already have at least a sense of where those are going to be. And also we're just keeping the lines of communication open, because every time we have an amazing conversation with a world leader, with someone who is in charge of a city or state, the idea grows, changes, evolves, and we're really not setting anything until we've had a chance to have a conversation with the people in these communities, to see where where the greatest excitement is for the first few arcs.
Man, what a cool project. And I'm
Thank you.
excited to see it pan out. See the next steps. You said the website's arkhaven.io, and that right now there's a logo there. And
Yeah,
that's
there's our very nice logo, and
updates to come.
Yeah,
as
well,
things continue to progress.
we're about to make some changes across the board there, so stay tuned. But for now, the message is, in general, yeah, there may be some scary things coming, and things may not be great now, but if we can live in a way, that provides, shelter, food, water, energy, and community to people, and they can share those resources and also those good feelings, right, with the communities around them. I mean, this isn't some sort of high-minded, approach to philosophy of living or anything like that. This is like simple human truths. If we can give people safety and security, and allow them and give them the ability to share with people around them, things will just be better. And we'll start to see, reduction in all of these problems we talked about before.
Yeah. Well, I got about 50 more questions, but we can we'll save it for another conversation. Is there anything else that you're working on right now, or any other anything else that you want to mention, or where people can find you to continue to learn more and kind of follow on with the journey? Or is there any other projects that you're working on that you want people to know about?
You know, there's, I'm almost afraid to say it because it would force me to follow through on something that I've
Yeah.
been sort of dragging my feet on. You know what? I'm just going to say it. I'm starting a gratitude project. Uh, Thank you for inspiring.me, where I'll be writing open letters to people who probably never read them. But 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 the idea is to start sharing my gratitude to the people who've inspired me along the way, and some in big ways, some in little ways. Sometimes it's just someone who I was like, man, I would love to grab a beer with this person or something along those lines, right?
Yeah.
So that's a project that I'm working on, and the idea there is to hopefully inspire other people to start sharing gratitude, because it costs you nothing, and it means so much to the person who receives it. So keep on the lookout for that. You know, you can find me on LinkedIn. You can find me on really, that's a bit. I completely swore off social media. So
Wise.
what's that?
I said that's wise.
You know what? It's so great.
Yeah.
I don't know about you, but like my reaction to social media is that when I do a lot of it, I go from like 0 to triggered in like
Yeah.
less time than it will take the Tesla Roadster to go from 0 to 60, right?
Yeah.
And I find that like just stepping away from that, I I I'm not triggered that way anymore. I don't get caught up in whatever the issue of the day is, and that's good, because you know, at the end of the day, I care, like a lot of us do. I just don't have the emotional bandwidth to care about everything, right?
Mhm.
So it allows me to focus on the things that matter. And you know, if you come to me and say, hey, look, I need your support for this, great, you have it. Like I may not, you know, stand on the wall with you because I've got to start this whole Arkhaven thing, but like I am so with you on this, right? Just, you know.
Yeah, not to go down another rabbit hole right now, but you mentioned this earlier that I think it was this conversation. I'm pretty sure it was this conversation that it's kind of funny now that I've been doing the podcast for a while and I've talked to so many people. I like every day I'll have these thoughts kind of like, somebody told me once. I'm like, wait, did I think that? No, did somebody else tell me? You know, I'm constantly trying to remember what amazing person told me this thing. But earlier you said something along the lines of, even if we knew that that was going to solve all of our problems or something, would we do it? Would we actually change anything? It's like our human nature isn't, change is hard. And it's really interesting to me with social media. I don't know anybody I've ever talked to, including myself. I'm preaching to myself right now. I don't know, but anybody I've ever talked to that says, "Oh, I'm much better I'm a better person, I'm a better friend, I'm a better family member, I'm a better dad, mom, sibling, whatever, because of social media." Almost everybody would agree. Oh my, and the thing people say is, "Oh my gosh, like I wish I didn't use my phone so much. I wish I wasn't staring at my screen so much." Or, "Oh yeah, I stopped using Instagram for a week and it was such a better week." But then we're right back on it, right? Like it's just, it is kind of interesting when we know the data now, we have enough information. And again, preaching to myself here, that shows it's a waste, you know, there's good in it, right? There's always good in everything. There's hope in it. There's optimism you can find on it, whatever. Hope Strategy podcast is a great place to, you know, to find it. We use it as a tool. I run a marketing agency. I use it for our clients, like all this stuff. But we just know that if everybody overnight just said, let's not use this anymore and let's get back to communicating in our families and in our communities and in our states and in our cities and in our country, whatever, in different ways, then it tends to be much healthier. And like you said, even if this stuff is interesting, we only have so much emotional, psychological bandwidth. And once we've used that up, it gets overwhelming. And then we see increases in anxiety and depression and all these things, right? So we could go down an entire rabbit hole on that, but it is interesting. It's one of those things that we know is not good for us.
Well,
But
I would love to have that conversation, because you know it's and this is like another hour conversation, but
yeah,
the short version of it is, you know, Social Dilemma.
yeah,
Maybe you saw that. If you didn't, I'll
I
wait.
did. Yeah.
You can go see it now. And then, you know, one of my favorite podcasts after this one, obviously,
Obviously.
is the Happiness Lab. And they do a lot, you know, a lot of great research on happiness. And one of the things that I learned from that, and from a book on habits I read recently, is that, you know, if you want to change a habit, that's hard. You just have to replace the thing you do,
Mm-hmm.
right? There's, you know, there's the trigger, then there's the thing you do, then there's the reward, right? Like the trigger is going to be there, the reward is going to be there. It's the thing you do in the middle that right now maybe it's Facebook or Twitter or whatever the kids are doing these days. Um,
TikTok.
you know, TikTok. You just swap that out for something else, and for what it's worth, I'll just share this with you. And this, I mean, this is maybe just between us. I don't know if this gets edited out, but um, there's 3 questions I ask myself now every time I pick up my phone. Why did I pick up my phone? How am I feeling right now? And what else could I be doing? Right. And, if the answer is I picked up my phone because I'm bored, right? Or I picked up my phone because I don't want to be thinking whatever thoughts I'm thinking. You're like, and now I'm feeling distracted, and distracted is almost always how I'm feeling, right?
Yeah.
And then what else could I be doing? I mean, the answer almost doesn't matter because it's just something of value, right?
Yeah.
So it's not like you give up social media to exercise. That's not going to work, right? Like you have to find something that's sort of like equally rewarding and replace it with that. So
Well, it's just this crazy experiment that we've been running now for, 10, 15 years of, if you could get all information at all times right in front of you at any moment, what would that do to you? And that's what it is, because it's not just social media. For me, it's ESPN, it's stocks, it's the news, it's whatever, right? It's like if I'm sitting there, and that's great. I love the intention with which you're thinking and acting to say, okay, I'm going to actually go through a couple of questions real quick before I engage with this device, because I'll think, I do it. I've got 4 kids, man. And I'll be sitting there. Sometimes I'll sit on the couch. It's been busy. And I'll be like, oh, did the Jazz win the game today? So I'll pull out my phone and I'll start like flipping through. And the next thing you know, I'm reading an article about Kyrie Irving doing this and that, all this stuff going on. And I'm like, and then I notice, oh, dang it. And I'm almost ashamed to say, but I think everybody out there does this, where it's like, oh, my sweet little 2-year-old sitting next to me and she's wanting some attention, like, and that's me, who tries very hard to be intentional and to not use my phone, and it's just, there's a lot of course I have to try to justify it, because that's just my, my human nature to do. But it is interesting to see how much we have at our fingertips. And the other thing that's funny is like, how many conversations are you in now where it's like, yada, yada, yada. Oh, who was in that movie? Like, da, da, da. And it used to be like, I don't know. Let's talk about it for a second. I can't remember. Now it's like, somebody's like, hey, Siri.
right.
Like, then there goes my watch already listening to me. But, somebody has to have the answer immediately. We're just like constantly need the data, the information, the knowledge, whatever. And it's just right there. And it's interesting to see how that'll continue to evolve. I mean, there's no way that it's not. I don't know how we shut that down completely. But those 3 questions you ask yourself are a great place to start for anybody. Is to how can I become more intentional with how I engage, with these tools.
Yeah. And I'll just add that when you do have these moments, and it's invariably something big, right? Like I'm looking at my screen while my infant daughter is looking in my face, right? Like,
Yeah.
there's this, there's moments like that where you're like, God, what kind of trash human am I?
Yeah.
Right. And I think the relationship that we have with ourselves in that moment is very difficult, right? Because I think the normal reaction is to say, this is bad, I'm being bad, or I'm a bad person, or whatever, right? I would urge, to the extent that anyone actually hears this part of what we're talking about,
Yeah.
I would urge them to not respond that way.
Not
To
go the
say,
shame
okay,
route.
yeah, to say, okay, I see that this is happening. I acknowledge this, right? I want to feel in yourself, right? Where that, like, are you feeling anxiety? Are you literally like, are you feeling it in your heart? Are you feeling it in your shoulders? Like, where are you feeling it? And then just acknowledge that, right? Just say, okay,
Sit
that's
with it for a
there.
minute. Yeah.
Yeah. Just like, it's okay. And then just let it be, let it go. And when we lose that adversarial relationship with it, then that sort of like shame spiral, listen, that loop, it just sort of breaks down. And then you can sort of have this mindset where you say, every day I wake up is a new day. Every day I wake up refreshed. Every moment is a new moment to do and be the things that I wanted to, the way that, that I want to do and be in the world. Right. And so if you step away from that, you remind yourself as often as you can to ask those intentional questions and find like a meaningful other thing to do. Like for me, I started writing letters. I started, I started really diving into more meaningful conversations with people because, those sorts of things feel really good,
Yeah.
and they make the world better. And I assure you, like if you pick up your phone to check TikTok or whatever, to check, Instagram, see what your friends are up to, it will take the exact same amount of time to scroll through your phone, just randomly pick a number of someone in your life that you haven't spoken to in a little bit, and just, give them a call.
Yeah.
Hey, what's up? How are you doing? And it takes this same amount of time, and it adds to your life. It doesn't take away.
Cool.
Anyway.
I agree. And I do want this to stay in the podcast. So Tom, if you're listening to this, keep it in, edit it, put it where you need to. But no, yeah, we could keep going. So maybe we'll have to talk again at some point. But man, I'm glad that Basila put us in touch, and I look forward to hopefully staying in touch. Keep me posted on what you're working on, and everybody go and follow this story. I love what you're working on. That Arkhaven.io. It'll be fun to see the updates on there as you keep going at it. And yeah, appreciate your time. Thanks for sharing so much with us. And thanks for taking so much time.
Oh, thank you so much. This has just been highlight of my week. So I appreciate it. I look forward to the next time.
Okay. All right, man. Keep in touch.
Take care. All right. Likewise. Bye now.
This is the Hope Strategy Podcast with Corey Blake and Josh Steinley.